with literacy, mathematics, school leadership. And for the past 5 years, we've actually been working with schools on this virtual realm and leading virtual engagements such as PLCs and different sorts of webinars. So we're super excited to get to partner with you guys and to kind of share the tricks of the trade that we've learned over the past several years and bring to you this webinar that can hopefully inspire you and make you feel a little bit more confident in this new world we find ourselves in with this virtual education. So without further ado, we'll just go ahead and get started. Today's topic is engagement in the virtual realm. So we will be covering tools, protocols, strategies, and even some particular websites that you might be able to put into play. So before we get started, let's make sure we have our learning space set up for success. We'll be using the chat, which is at the bottom of the Zoom window. If you're not familiar with it, hover your mouse over the bottom of this Zoom window screen, where at the bottom of everyone's faces, there should be a little bubble that says chat. If you click on that, it'll pop a chat out to the right-hand side. We will be using that feature to insert links for you to click on, as well as a place for responding. Rebecca is going to be my co-host today to help me stick those chat links in there for you guys. So she'll be managing that, as well as any questions. If you have questions along the way, she'll be fielding for those within the chat window. So the chat will be a place that you can pose a question all throughout the session today, so we can be sure to answer any questions that you might have. So she has already dropped the link to today's agenda. So I wanted you to see that. That is our other tool for guiding us through this session today. It is a link that you will not lose access to, so you can refer back to it as your note space or place for you to refer back to the links. But we'll talk more about the agenda in a moment. So if you can please reduce any other distractions from your screen. We will be using the Zoom window, the chat, and our agenda. And I will be pacing you through all of those switches. All right, so I'll go ahead and share my screen. If you're not familiar with Zoom, that might alter what your screen looks like a little bit. I have posted the agenda here for us to take a look at together. You see our topic here is practical tools to engage your learners. And our goal for today is that participants will gain ideas for and experience with virtual tools to engage virtual learners. So you'll see our session is divided into 3 sections. We will be covering engagement before your session begins, engagement during, that's the real meat of our session, and engagement after your sessions close, with a special attention to closure at the very end of our session today. So that's what our agenda looks like. So we'll go ahead and jump in with engagement before and considering your virtual space. I'm gonna stop sharing and just pay homage to the virtual space. I intentionally didn't put any kind of background here because this is an important piece to talk about as a foundation for virtual sessions. It's important to consider everything that can be seen and heard within your virtual space. It's really the foundation of inspiring engagement with your participants. So it's fine if you don't have a fancy backdrop or a green screen or anything like that. All you need to do is make sure that it isn't cluttered and there isn't anything to grab attention, anything that's visible, no dangly earrings, some basic clothing, nothing that's going to catch attention. And the other thing is what can be heard. So reduce any sounds that might be in the way, such as pets or small children, to the utmost of your ability. Reduce anything that would detract from the session. So if it doesn't belong to the session, try to remove it. That's a pretty basic suggestion, but it is one of the most important things, is to protect your virtual space especially when you're trying to engage students as learners. They can be easily distracted, and engagement is our top tool against that. So jumping back into the agenda now, considering your virtual space is number 1 rule. Agendas would be the next consideration for before your engagement even takes place. So this is my recommendation. I use this style of agenda for almost all of my virtual sessions. I organize myself by time, how much time to spend, the topic, and then I plan out my discussions. You'll also see that it's a one-stop shop for all of the things we'll talk about, as well as all of the links. I'll go ahead and say, please refrain from clicking any of the links ahead of time. I promise we'll have plenty of time to explore. And like I said, this agenda stays as a resource for you to revisit later in the future. So agendas are important. I've shared it with you today. You can do that right on the fly, or it can be something that you share ahead of time. Sometimes when I'm working with more advanced learners, I'll pose the agenda ahead of time so that they can also chime in with additional ideas or questions that they have, and that can help strengthen the focus of a session. So agendas are super important. I like to call it a one-stop shop for everything about our work we do together. The third piece would be testing the equipment and resources. And for this, I totally recommend having a stellar buddy like I do with Rebecca. We hop on a call together and we test out all of the links, all of the audio and video to make sure that everything works. When we're in technology, so many things are out of our control, but when you test things ahead of time, you're putting the ball more in your court than otherwise. So one of the scariest things to try to do is to share video or share audio online. And so what I posted here with all the bravery I can muster is a video. So the link is here for you to refer to later, but I'd like just to test it out. I tried it with my friend Rebecca. Let's see if it works today. Can you see my screen okay? Can I have a thumbs up? Are you able to hear the audio? Are you able to hear the audio? Anyone? Yes?
Yes.
Oh, good. I'm going to enlarge the screen. This is a 2-minute video. Please take a moment to enjoy.
Most have many of us seen.
All right. So that was a fun little video. So I'm going to go ahead and jump back to our agenda. And we're going to partake. I'm so glad that worked, aren't you? So Think and Share is a little protocol that I like to use. We have, for this case, I did a Think and Share 10:30, and 10:30 just refers to the time frame. So a 10-second think and a 30-second share on this question here that you see in the agenda. How does this how does this video relate to your current situation with technology? So we'll have 10 seconds to think about that, and then we'll see who would like to share. So 10 seconds. All right. Rebecca's going to drop that in the chat so you can see it. I'm going to click stop share so we can see your faces. Who would like to share? And it's a 30-second max so we can stay on pace. So in 30 seconds or less, how does this video relate to your technological experience right now?
The unexpected.
The unexpected. Absolutely. There's a lot unexpected going on. Thank you. Who else would like to share?
I would.
Okay.
I noticed that if I am pushing buttons that I didn't know I was pushing before, things work and things don't.
That's true. Sometimes we're just winging it and trying, making something work.
Yeah.
Empathize with that little girl trying to save her friend.
And we have a message from your colleague Polly who's saying it's out of control.
Yes, that was out of control for a bit.
Dealing with the technology and the requests, I feel like when he was on the bridge and all the planes were coming at him. And how do you dodge the planes, but also help those people who are looking for the support, that they're looking to you for support and guidance.
Good notice. Thank you for sharing. Is there maybe one final person we would like to share, 30 seconds or less? We have a helper down there. All right, so we'll go ahead and move forward then. One piece that I really, that resonated with me when I first watched that video was the tinkering sound, the old-fashioned sound in the beginning, the little tune that was playing, and then we got all technological with all the crazy music and pew pew fighting. And then at the end, we returned to that calm, basic piano tinkering. And so what that talks, or how that resonates with me, is that there are tools that we already have in our tool basket that are nice and old-fashioned. They're things that we're used to using every day as educators in our classroom, and I'd like to think about how those can carry on forward. Did you notice how he had his cane in the beginning and then he lost it, and then he found the cane in the end right as he was rescued? So paying homage to those things that we do know already and that are already in our toolbox, we don't want to let those go just because we're in the virtual realm. We want to bring those into our space together. All right, so thank you for that time to share. I know that all of us don't know each other very well in this room, so it's nice to that you have that bravery to just speak out in the virtual sense here on our screen. So I'm going to jump back to our agenda. Very grateful that that equipment check worked for us today. Just a quick note though, if any time it doesn't work, try not to waste too much time on it, just to keep moving forward and maybe tell the story instead. It's never as good. It's great to have the video, but try not to dally too long when the equipment doesn't work. But testing the equipment before and moving on forward is a great way to reduce the issues. All right, so setting norms is last but not least when you're talking about engagement before your session ever begins. So I'm going to scroll down to the bottom of our agenda here where I've dropped some notes for us to be able to refer to together. So before a meeting, we're talking about norms now. So before your session begins, it's important to consider what are the needs of the session and think about norms that will support your work moving forward. For example, it is imperative today that I had a co-facilitator so that we can cover a lot of ground, and I have this helper that can help us cover a lot of ground quickly. Meeting rules is a way, like I said, to bridge our in-person classroom into the virtual sense. If you've employed roles in your in-person classroom, you may want to employ roles in your virtual classroom with students. Having someone keep the time, or having a student that can post questions in the chat for you, and so on. Thinking about how roles can help your session move forward is a handy tool. How to ask questions is really important. For us, the chat is so easy. If you're using Google Classroom or any other forum where all the documents are shared, then questions could be asked in a different way. How those materials are shared is really important. I'm hearing from teachers and parents all over the nation that this is one of the most important norms that we can set in place for those parents that are trying to support learning at home. Having it consistent and organized and easy to access material housing is really super important. Protocols that you can use anytime, for example, how to ask questions, or if you're using the roles, any protocols that you want to put into place, perhaps raising a hand, or that all students would be muted or not muted, what protocols will support your session. And then kind of similar to that would be expectations, and laying these out for students maybe even before your session begins, but definitely within your first session. What is the expectation with how to treat one another, or starting and ending on time? Laying those expectations out and making them clear in the virtual world, just like we do in the classroom, is a super important norm to bring to your virtual session. But before we move forward, I would love for you to post in the chat. We have this discussion question here. I've given two choices for you. Either which norm do you feel is the most important for engagement on that list that we just looked at, or what additional idea for a meeting norm do you have, perhaps that you've already put into place, or something you'd like to bridge from your classroom into the virtual sense. So please take a moment to jot in the chat one answer or both answers to the question. Thank you, Rebecca, for posting all of that in the chat for us. That's handy. Yes, so B. Walter, the norms, Rebecca posted that right above the question. So the co-facilitator, the meeting rules, how to ask questions, it's also at the bottom of the agenda. Keeping it simple, that's important. Expectations for the learners and the teacher, very important. Protocols, so everyone knows what's expected. And doesn't that make our learners feel safe? When they know what to expect and when they know how things are going to be handled, that is engagement in and of itself. If they feel safe and welcomed into your virtual classroom, a lot of times the virtual nature of things can feel very unsettling to a lot of us. Less for children than adults, I think, but creating that safe learning environment is really important, and norms can help us do that. Setting up expectations just like in class. Good. Awesome. Thank you all for putting those notes in the chat. That is a lovely segue into what we're talking about next. I'll jump back to share the screen. You notice I go back and forth. I like to be able to see everyone throughout the session, so it's fun for me to be able to hop out of my shared screen and see your faces and watch you lean in and take part. All right, so we've covered a lot of ground here with engagement before, thinking about how to set up engagement before your session begins. But now we're going to go into the real deal here with engagement during. You notice a lot of participant involvement already within the session. It's really important to think about how to pull in your learners, pause to discuss frequently, and gather intel either through the chat or through verbalizing. But before we get deep into the engagement during, I'd like to talk for just a second about how in-person engagement tools compare to virtual engagement tools. And we've touched on this, but I want to just bring to light a few of the examples that I've heard from other teachers throughout these last few weeks. One, for example, would be sound cues. Some kindergarten teachers use sound cues within their classroom all the time, so they've brought sound cues into their virtual classroom. Another one would be rewards. If you have a reward system where students earn points or they earn little tokens of whatever sort, bringing that into the virtual sense can inspire that engagement as well. One really big tool that we use in our classroom that doesn't transfer into the virtual realm would be proximity. Obviously, we can no longer go stand beside that student that needs help staying focused. We can't lean over to check on their work and do all of those great things that helps keep engagement tight. But these engagement tools that we're going to discuss here for during instruction or during your session can help to overcome that loss of proximity. So before we move further in this list of 5 bullets here for engagement during, I don't want you to get a sense of being overwhelmed or think that anyone's asking you to do all of these things at once. What I want you to think about as we cover these during skills is to think about one piece that connects to you the most and feels doable to you, and try to focus in on 1 or 2 things that you can implement in the near future. So don't get overwhelmed and think you need to do all of them. I want to go ahead and just say that. Just think about which one feels the most comfortable to you and start there. Engagement can be layered on. I like to think of it like lasagna. We have to start somewhere and then slowly add those pieces as we go to make it a deeper and deeper engagement factor. But engagement's never done. So even if you have great engagement already, we can always keep stacking that lasagna as high as we can possibly go. All right, so let's go ahead and move forward with participant involvement. We've already had discussion both verbally and written. The chat feature within Zoom is great, but other platforms for virtual sessions have different types of chat features. Almost all of them do. So I encourage you to practice using chat and using the chat with your students. That's super easy. A poll is another way to have that quick participant involvement, especially with 3rd grade and up, but I know even kindergartners are using polls to communicate their emotional standing with each session. So polls are super easy and fun. We'll go ahead and take a poll together to see what that looks like. Rebecca's going to drop this link for you, but it is also clickable if you're looking at your own agenda and not the shared screen. But I'm going to go ahead and switch the screen over to what the poll looks like. We're asking you to answer 2 quick questions that can help provide me with some great insight, but it also gives you an opportunity to engage with your own opinions and taking a poll. So go ahead and use that link in the chat and answer these 2 quick questions, and we'll see your responses as they populate. All right, so I'll just go ahead and give a shameless plug to Google Forms. This is my favorite way to take polls. There are tons of opportunities out there in different platforms you can use. But to me, the Google Form just seems really, really seamless and easy to have control over what you're doing. But it's also fun if you can see the Zoom screen, how the ideas here are just popping up as you all are submitting your forms. It looks like we have 16 responses. That's probably all that we're waiting for. So this provides me with some great information, but it also has a nice way of bringing us all to the table together when you can view the responses as the participant. So it looks like we have our biggest population is 3rd through 5th grade. With the runner-up being, we have some upper grades and administrators here on board, and then support roles. So thank you for chiming in there.
Yes.
Shout out to the 1 middle school teacher that we have in the room. That is awesome. So then here is an interesting piece. I always love to look at this data on how your own engagement is impacted. So it looks like our biggest one here would be visuals, followed by varied activities. That's pretty common. That's been the results that I'm getting with all different groups of teachers or participants. So 2 things to think about right here. It is easiest for us to approach learning in the way that suits us best, but it is important to think about the different ways that other people might want to learn, or the ways that other people learn best. So you see, we do have representation of all of the different forms of engagement. So it's important to think of varying your engagement techniques across your sessions that you provide with our students. Wouldn't be a bad idea to ask your students this question and do it often so you can see how their virtual interaction evolves over time. So that's taking a poll. Super easy to do that, like I said, within Google Form, within the Google platform, but they have others out there as well that have some freebies that are fun to use. I use Google. That's the one I'm familiar with. All right, so moving forward with virtual note catching, I'll go ahead and a little spoiler here. Padlet has been one of the biggest responses that I've gotten from people that are just in love with Padlet. If you've never used it, get ready, because a lot of people are in love with this right now. But some virtual note catching, there is also Trello and Poplet is out there, and all of these tools provide a little freebie of you can purchase more to be able to do more, but they all provide a freebie that is super easy to work with. So Rebecca has dropped our Padlet link in the chat, or you can click it on the agenda if you're looking at it that way. And I'm going to just show it on this screen what Padlet looks like. Padlet's pretty cool in the sense that you can use it for virtual note catching. I've heard lots of reports of students being super engaged because it's just something different and they like how it works. It's really easy to use. But it's not only for virtual note catching. You can also use it to present information in a cohesive way and an engaging way. It's super easy to use. So I'm not really going to get into how to use it right now, but I just want to show you the capacity. So if you're logged into the Padlet, if you've used the link, I'd like you to go ahead and take a look at the 4 questions across, because this little demonstration is twofold. You see 4 questions. What do you like best about virtual instruction? If you will, please find a question that you want to answer simply by clicking the little plus sign, and you can enter your answer. We have another question: what is your greatest wonder? What skill are you developing? And what roadblock? So as you're looking at those questions and posing a response, I just want to explain kind of the depth of opportunity within this Padlet example. When we're trying to engage our learners and looking for as much participation and engagement as possible, one important thing to do is to vary the opportunity. So here we have 4 questions and not just one. So there's some choice in the matter, but they also go from simple to more complex, where students could answer just a simple 1-word answer, or they could journal out a whole big emotional response. So it goes from simple to complex, but there's also choice. So students or participants such as yourself can choose just to answer 1, or if you like to multitask and you want to listen and answer all 4 of them to stay engaged, then you have that opportunity as well. The fun thing with Padlet is you can turn on these settings very simply. It's a super easy menu to allow students to rate responses with stars, and you can also allow them to comment as well. And I know that some teachers have really had a lot of great response from students with this, where they love the ability to rate ideas and comment with one another, and they're just all of a sudden plugged in with the ability to go ahead and comment to one another. So I see one person has responded here. Is there anyone else who is able to plug in a response for us? I always like to go back and read all of these. A lot of great notions about things that people are really focused on and building, and then to see these roadblocks, that helps us to tune into what teachers are needing. So if you can, please go ahead and populate some answers by clicking the plus sign. I'd love to be able to take your input in this way as well. Just give you guys just a moment to populate your answers, and then we'll move forward. As you're entering your answer, I'll go ahead and show over here on the side the settings, just to see these are all of the tools that I use to create this board. They narrow down the choices for adding an icon, choosing a wallpaper, and then entering in the pieces like the title. Otherwise, adding a column for a new question here is super easy. It's very intuitive and really easy to use. So that's Padlet.com. Thank you for those of you who have posed your answers, and we'll be going back and checking this out. So thank you for that. All right, so Padlet is a fun tool, lots of possibilities. I thoroughly encourage you to explore Padlet and see all of the different opportunities there. And Trello and Poplet are notable sources as well. All right, so moving on to my second favorite engagement tool, and that's a shared writing space. So Rebecca's going to drop this link into our chat, and you're going to have another opportunity to share your response. I'll go ahead and click it open on this screen so you can see what I'm talking about. This is a shared journaling space, and again, it's been developed for you guys in mind in a very deliberate way. So what you see here would be two icons or two images, memes, if you will, with quotes. So that's very deliberate as well. We have quotes that can be inspirational. We also have images. So that's reaching multiple desired platforms of communication. But I've also provided a choice, right? So we have image number 1 and image number 2. What I'd love for you to do is to review these two images and determine which one resonates the most with you and why. Is it number 1 or is it number 2? And I'll go ahead and highlight that question for us. And then I'd like for you to pick a box where no one is writing. You can tell because the cursor will be there. And tell us which quote you chose. Jot a quick response to the question about why does it resonate with you. So you can see an example here for number 2. So just take a moment to decide and then pick a box and enter your response. So at this point, just to be explicit about this as a tool, if I had 18 students in my classroom, I would certainly want to see 18 cursors moving. Knowing my students, I'd be able to lean in and look at the screen and determine who's engaged or not. It also provides us a bank of ideas that we can connect to future learning, where I have these little snippets of immediate feedback from the students that I'd be able to utilize either for scoring purposes or connecting to the learning in the future. So this shared writing space has endless possibilities of ways to engage your students right away, check in with their understanding, and also perhaps have that opportunity to learn a little bit more, to stretch your own thinking about the topic. I see a reference to the planes again, hanging on to the bridge. All right. So thank you for those of you who have already entered your response. Please feel free to take a moment to think and enter it at a later time. It does look like, again, oh, we're almost even. I find that really fascinating that we tend to have an even choice, 1 versus the 2. So it's almost even here. Well, these images were chosen in particular for the purpose of content. So it's going to spiral us into the next idea. But you can choose images and choose questions or what have you to also level your learning experience. So these are very deliberate towards content, but you could also offer the opportunity of maybe one's more complex and one's on a lower level. You can also ask students if they want to, they can respond to both. So that offers the opportunity to continue responding and staying engaged. But it also offers the opportunity, I'm not able to write very much or I'm not able to read very much, and so I need something more simplistic. And you can do that simply with differentiation right here on the screen. But for us, it's about content. We have a quote about success through consistency, as well as through pacing yourself and considering the right pace. And so that connects us right into our agenda with the final 2 tools for driving engagement during your session. So I'm just going to go ahead and scroll down one more time and drop some notes at the bottom of the agenda in regards to consistency and pacing. So these are 2 tools that we definitely use when we're in person in the classroom, but they can obviously translate into our virtual environment as well. So it's worth giving a nod and just calling out some of these ways that we can spur engagement in our virtual sense. So consistency first. For example, opening and closing a session, providing that safety of this is how we start and this is how we end. It leaves a nice tied up presentation when you have that consistency. Resource storage, that deserves another call out, how we store and refer back to our resources, how parents can retrieve resources. All of that's really important to be consistent. And then participation expectations. Don't be scared to have your little popsicle sticks to draw here in the virtual world as well. We need to continue to have expectations for participation and to vary it, not always calling on the same students and so on, but having equitable expectations for everyone to participate to the best of your ability. All right, and pacing, last but not least, it is a marathon and not a sprint. So we do have to allow time for ourselves as the professionals to get used to new features before we present them. And we also need to allow our students and families time to step into these new learning experiences. But also don't be afraid to use wait time. Just like you've noticed we've done here before. It feels more awkward in the virtual world for some reason, but it is important to utilize wait time in the virtual sense as well. Build up to a faster pace over time. You don't want to have that lag time in your session, but there is an appropriate pace when we're talking about new learning. And technology for most people is new learning. So avoiding lag time and slowly building up to a faster pace is really important. And last but not least, this is mostly important for the older content levels. I've heard some feedback from older students in my life that overload in those final minutes just makes you feel stressed and uncertain about what's coming next. And it leaves that final taste in your mouth of, oh, that was just too much, or it was overwhelming. So avoid overload in the final minutes of your session. If you get to the end of your time and you haven't finished, have a protocol in place of how you can carry on and allow yourself a nice cushion to end and end well. And we'll talk about a strong closure here in the end. But avoiding overload in the final minutes is a fatal flaw for spurring engagement in your next session. All right, so consistency and pacing, those were the final two of our engagement protocols during. So with that, I'm going to pause for just a moment and see how we're doing. We're doing pretty good on time. So what I'd like to do is just pause for any questions that you have for this just engagement during, any questions or further curiosities about any of these tools. I'll stop sharing and just give a moment. If you want to pose your question in the chat, or if you want to just unmute yourself and pose it now, we can do it that way. Any questions about what we've covered so far? How is the pacing for you? And I can just have a thumbs up, down, sideways. Are we moving too quickly? Are we going right at the right pace? Is it so-so? How are we? If I could see thumbs up or down, sideways. Oh, I see Maria use the virtual tool. Okay, pacing is good. And if I were with my students, that might be a poll that I would pose throughout. Am I going too fast? Am I going too slow? Just so I can learn how they are responding virtually. Polls are really a great way to gather that kind of participation feedback. All right, so we'll go ahead and move forward. Feel free to populate any questions in the chat as we continue to move forward. All right, so we've covered a lot of ground about being engaging during your online session, but engagement doesn't stop there. After the session, your follow-up provides another important layer to the opportunity to engage your learners. So we'll cover these three engagement after techniques. I've put together a quick little visual, and it is there in your agenda, just to guide us through this quick conversation. So 3 areas for engagement after your session. And one, the very first one is troubleshooting. Whenever something goes wrong within your session, it is important to continue that pacing and just to suggest, hey, Bobby, I'll get with you after the session. We'll fix that up. No problems. But to make the other 25 participants not have to wait, but also have Bobby feel like, okay, I'm heard. But you need to, whether you have that conversation on screen or not, if there are any problems that pop up, you need to troubleshoot right away. So that then for your next session, whoever was impacted by that problem feels more confident moving forward with you, or you feel more confident going into your next session. The second piece is sharing resources and next steps. With my sessions, even though I have next steps in the agenda, my protocol is that I also email those next steps and reshare the agenda again. That's probably what I would do somewhere in my classroom. I would have it posted. I would have a file for extra papers or what have you. So the way to do that virtually is to have a second space after your session has concluded where these resources are instigated again, or the next steps are instigated again. I do that through email. You might do that through a group chat or what have you. But sharing the resources again and layering over next steps is important. Connecting the learning is also super important and a feature that's often missing in our virtual session. Connecting the learning is something that we do easily in person, but it's a little bit more tricky. You have to be really intentional about it in the virtual realm. But one way that you've seen here today is that this topic is something immediately applicable to you. And that's what we're suggesting, is that you take these pieces and you apply them. Another way that you've seen it modeled today is that some of our activities connect or feed or front load the next activity. So that validates what you're doing because it connects to the learning. But in the sense of content for your students, what that might look like is the intentionality looking across time. So if you're looking at online, maybe we've learned together in a virtual session, we've learned a new reading strategy or a mathematics strategy. And then your homework or the suggestion of what they do between sessions with you is that they practice that on an assignment or an assigned text, knowing that when they come back to you, so making that connection that explicitly, hey, next time I see you guys, we're going to work together on a shared task and we're going to implement that strategy. So something that I've heard from a lot of teachers lately is that the parents are doing the work for them and the kids aren't really engaged. It's just the parents clicking all the boxes. Well, this connecting the learning is a way that we can combat that. Because if the students know that they need to understand it in order to attend or take part in the next piece, then they're going to be more plugged in to authentically learn it. So being really intentional about how all of the pieces that you're bringing into your virtual sessions connect and how it's about the learning and it's about the abilities and skills and not just completing an assignment is a way that you can spur true engagement in this virtual sense. All right, so those would be the 3 tools for after your session and inspiring that engagement, making it connected and troubleshooting any problems. So I'll stop sharing there, and in our agenda, if you'll look there, we have one more discussion for the chat, and Rebecca will put that into the chat box for us. So just take a moment to review the tools of engagement that we've covered. We still have the very important closing, but when we're looking at just before your session, during your session, and after, which tool stands out to you as the most important to use and why? If you can share with us that reflection, or what's a key takeaway that's resonating with you right now? I'd love everyone just to take a moment to answer one or both questions if you'd like in the chat, and just share with us what you're thinking about right now.
Angie, we also had 2 questions that had come up before. So one is from, and I'll read these as folks are sharing your reflections in the chat. So Amalia had asked about, do you have to set up Padlet as a classroom? And Tracy is asking about any text to read tools for our younger kiddos who may not yet be literate or may not yet be able to type, kids of any age.
Yes, for sure. Padlet is not a classroom setup situation. It's really just a tool, just like we used, where I would share a link where I want you to enter your information, or I would share a link that just shows you information. And so it's not a classroom setup. The students just need the link though. They don't have to create an account or anything. It just opens up a web page where they can enter the response. So it's super simple to use. I encourage you to make a quick account and try it out with a friend. You do get three freebies to create a board, but that's so easy. You can, once you get to your 3, you can erase the first and continue on with those 3 as much as you want. As far as reaching our younger learners, some of the tips that I've heard from kindergarten teachers is just the one-click ideas. So when you're doing polls, have the response be just a clickable. Also to use your mouse to hover over words as you're reading them. And I'll just refer back to what I mean by sharing my screen. So if I'm saying close, this word on the screen is close. Let's all say it, close, just like you would in the classroom to highlight the words, and just to keep it simpler. There are all kinds of free books out there and readers that do this for students. I would have to jump into a base and perhaps if we're able to have a sign up and we can share other protocols and tips on what those resources are. I haven't prepared that for today's meeting, but there are a bunch of freebies out there for young readers.
And I have, is it okay if I share one thing quickly, Angie, related? So as Angie said, we could do a whole session on this, and maybe we will be doing a whole session on this. There's a lot to get into and a lot of ideas about using our virtual space to really level up the supports we have for all of our kiddos. Very quickly about Padlet in terms of being a classroom. If you are using Google Classroom, you can fully integrate Padlet, and there are ways of doing that. I would encourage a quick Google search, but we can also support you with that if you'd like some follow-up afterwards. And the other piece about Padlet is what we tried out was the opportunity to type. There are also opportunities with Padlet to share a voice recording, a video, a quick sketch for kiddos or even for folks who want those different opportunities. So there's, again, a whole session's worth of talking through opportunities for kiddos who may not yet be literate or comfortable with the typing, but very quickly in terms of the tools that Angie has used, Padlet can be used for different ways of responding, including video and audio recording and sketching.
Awesome. Thank you, Rebecca, for that quick summary. I know my cognitive wheels just started spinning with lots of ideas. I wish I had more time to share, but we'll stay on track and make sure that we leave a cushion for our very important closure protocols. But I'm looking at some of the ideas that you guys have posted on what's resonating with you. And what I love about this is that this new group today is bringing about a focus on a whole new slant on what's most important and what your takeaways are. And what I'm noticing is a lot of you are focusing in on essentially just the basics, which is really, really key. And like I mentioned with the video that we watched before, you guys are chock full of engagement techniques that you use in the classroom. And it's really simple. We don't have to make it more techy. We just have to think about protecting that engagement and inspiring it with these simple techniques that we know already as teachers, and making sure it translates into our online sessions. So that's awesome to see that you all are inspired by just the basic strategies of teaching that need to come into our virtual realm. All right, so we will go ahead and you please feel free to continue that journaling. I'm going to save that and I want to refer back to it later. So thank you for sharing your ideas and reflections. So last but not least, we are going to take a look at closure here. I always give a buffer of at least 5 minutes. You can see we have 7 minutes remaining. So at least 5 minutes. I can fit this in 5 minutes, but I like to have even more time than that. But definitely give yourself at least 5 minutes for a closure. Because closure is super important. Having a strong closure is really the taste that you're leaving in the mouth of your participants at the end. So you want that to be something that's positive and organized and inspires what's coming next. So we'll look at these 3 techniques to use during your closure. And today, during this case, I'll model the use of these 3, but we're also still learning. So the closure is continuing the learning for us. So for the first thing would be to recap the goals. That's really simple as an important tool for closing any lesson, but we'll definitely do that here as well. That's why I like to have that at the top of the agenda. I like to go back, now and then you might stray from your goals, and it's important to give a call out to that, hey, our lesson today went another way. So next time we come, we're going to go back to this goal or what have you. But today I do think that we've really hit the nail on the head. We've looked at all kinds of ideas, and you guys have done a great job taking part in these tools for engagement. Your reflections show that parts of this demonstration today are resonating with you. So that's really great to see. I feel pretty confident that we've met this goal for today. The next steps would be the next part to talk about and memorializing these in a certain way. And our next steps would be for you guys today that you're using the agenda and the tip sheet that's provided here for you in a link to plan for your engagement in your next virtual session. So like I said, just one takeaway, one piece, one layer that you'll apply to your next session that can strengthen the engagement with your students. So in memorializing the next steps, I've chosen just to put them here in the agenda that works and makes sense for us. But like I mentioned before, I also like to send an email to the groups that I meet with repeatedly, week in and week out, and I'll send an email as well. Hey guys, just a reminder, here are the next steps. I'm looking forward to hearing back from you. So memorializing them in some way where they can be referred back to again. So your next steps would be to apply some of today's tips and tricks into your next session. Partner with a colleague and practice some of these tools. Practice trying out the video, making sure that all your settings work. Practice a Padlet or what have you, and share with a colleague. And that way you can develop more confidence in what you're trying to apply, but it also offers the opportunity for collaboration and building skills by staying connected to our all-important colleagues during this time of being apart. And last but not least, gathering feedback. Gathering feedback is probably one of the most important pieces that you can do in a closure, because it can provide you with information on how things went, and it provides you with information on, did I really meet the goals that I set out to meet? And it also gives us one more time to all plug in together on a shared task or a shared activity. So I've given two of my favorite closure protocols here on the right-hand side. One of these is one when you're running out of time, a one-word WIP. This has been around for decades, so it's nothing new, but I love using it in the virtual world. What is one word that describes, for example, how you feel about today's learning? That's really an easy opportunity. A commitment statement might be used when you have a little bit more time to elaborate. Given today's learning, for example, what's one practice you'll commit to applying to tomorrow's work? It could be a strategy, it could be a time goal for students, but a one-word WIP or a commitment statement are two easy closures that you can have as an ongoing protocol. I know some teachers are also using a poll at the end of the session as well. So that would be another opportunity. So for today, since we are now down to 3 minutes, we will go ahead and take part in a one-word WIP. What's one word that describes how you feel about today's learning? If you'll go ahead and drop that in the chat, I'll go ahead and share a quick story that sometimes you'll think that everything didn't go well in your session, and the one-word WIP will change your mind on that. And likewise, sometimes you'll think it went really well, but the one-word WIP will help hone your focus back again. So please drop that one-word WIP. That provides me with feedback, but it also allows you the opportunity to see how other participants might have viewed the session for today. And with that, I will close by pointing out at the very, very bottom, pardon my scrolling, at the very, very bottom of the agenda today, you'll see 3 contacts. But I want to just tell you all that I really appreciate the opportunity to connect with you all. This is a collective journey that the whole nation is taking part in as we learn to flex with this virtual nature of our work. As a representative for Generation Ready, I'll say that I certainly hope to connect and support you all in the near future. We care about you, we care about your students, and we care about the learning and stress levels at this time. So if you have any feedback, any further questions, please feel free to reach out. We're happy to support you and on this journey, and we're doing it with you and flexing with you along the way. So we do have a survey link here at the bottom, as well as contact information. And I really appreciate all of you taking the time to grow today and taking part in the responses and sharing in the chat and what have you. So with that, I will stop sharing the screen. I'm excited to look at what's dropped in the chat, and I'll turn it over to Danielle if you'd like to have a final word to close us out.
Thank you so much. That was really just, I went into today feeling anxious, and you've set me in a calm mood for the rest of the day because it actually feels manageable right now.
Awesome. That is so great to hear.
Thank you for hosting, Angie and Rebecca, and thank you everyone for joining us. And we're here at PNW BOCES if there's anything we could do to help.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And I'll just refer back again. Rebecca put the link for a survey, a final survey in the chat. If you could take a moment to complete that, that would really help us to know how you experienced today's session and to know if we can support you further. So thank you all. I'll stay on. We have 60 seconds for any final questions. But if you are ready to carry on with your day, I wish you all the best. And thank you so much for taking part today.
Thank you.